Zoe is chairman of the Global Forum for Media Development, which a lot of you will know about, and has a huge history in media development, media freedom in Southern Africa and Africa and globally. And we're really, really honored that she was able to join us today to make the next keynote. So Zoe, over to you.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Michael, for the invitation and the opportunity to share a few thoughts on this very, very pressing issue. I was wondering maybe we should have had this after tea, then people would be smiling at me a little more. I'm very fortunate Michael has given me free rein. So I've titled my intervention, Media Viability, a Global Crisis from an African Perspective, the intersection of media sustainability and democracy. I thought that that would be a good introduction to the panel that comes after. In a world teeming with constant information, the media stands as an indispensable pillar, providing an informed public with a beacon of truth, fostering vital discourse and mirroring our societal realities. The media plays that vital role in shaping public information, informing citizens, and fostering a vibrant democracy. However, the media industry is facing an unprecedented crisis worldwide, and Africa is no exception. This key sentinel of democracy faces a profound global crisis, a crisis which holds deep repercussions for our democracies, one that requires urgent and decisive intervention. Africa, with its rich diversity and unique socio-political landscape, presents a fascinating case study, I believe. The media in Africa has traditionally been a powerful tool for promoting social change, advocating for human rights, and amplifying marginalized voices. But crucially, the media is not just a guardian of democracy, it's also a business with financial obligations to meet, content to produce, and technological advancements to keep up with the traditional sources of revenue, such as printing and advertising revenue, as we know, and sales have been significantly disrupted by the digital age. As advertising revenue shifted to digital platforms, media houses found their financial stability threatened, putting their independence and survival at risk. If you allow me, I'd like to reference 3 countries just to emphasize the scope and the complexity of this challenge. Namibia, where I'm from, is constantly hailed as the freest press in Africa. I don't necessarily agree, but that is the case. And it boasts a media environment which is relatively free from government interference, with diverse outlets providing a variety of viewpoints. However, there has been concerns about the sustainability of print media, specifically to declining readership and advertising revenues. Still, Namibian media has, as best as it can, been making efforts to embrace digital platforms to reach broader audiences and has increasingly invested in investigative journalism. But long-term, sustainability remains its biggest challenge. Let's go further to South Sudan, which provides a starkly different challenge. Its challenges are related to political instability, civil unrest, and economic volatility. Here, media houses grapple with censorship, threats, and violence, making media sustainability a particularly difficult task. Yet, in the face of these hardships, we witness a rise in citizen journalism and community radios providing vital and locally relevant information. I'd say that the media landscape in South Sudan really reminds us of the vital role of media in peace building and democratic consolidation. Further on to Sierra Leone, the media landscape here reflects both progress and ongoing challenges. Sierra Leone's media has been seen in the last few years, well, at least since the end of the civil war, significant civil war in 2002, significant growth in terms of diversity and freedom. However, issues such as limited resources, a lack of professional training, and occasional political interference poses challenges to its viability. But despite these hurdles, the media is gradually moving towards sustainability. The Sierra Leonean experience reaffirms that while challenges exist, progress towards media viability and a strong democracy is attainable, which is evident through their national plan of action on the issue of sustainability. Each of these examples presents us with unique lessons. They show us that while each country has its challenges, the goal of achieving a viable, free, and independent media that bolsters democracy remains the same. The way forward, I believe, necessitates innovative solutions tailored to each unique context, a commitment to press freedom from governments, the political will that Justine emphasized earlier, a dedication to quality and investigative journalism from media professionals, and, importantly, an engaged, informed citizenry that values and supports the critical role of media in society. So, enter big tech. Big tech companies with their vast resources, global reach, influential platforms have become players in this media ecosystem, probably the central players now in this media ecosystem. These companies have become the primary sources of information for billions of people worldwide. They have the power to shape the narrative, influence public opinion, and even, as we know, affect elections. While they offer opportunities for diverse voices to be heard, their algorithms and recommendation systems employed by big tech platforms can unintentionally, or perhaps also intentionally, amplify echo chambers, reinforcing pre-existing beliefs and polarizing societies. And of particular concern, the spread of misinformation and disinformation on these platforms further undermines democratic processes, eroding trust in institutions and distorting public discourse. I'm not going to delve into the areas for attention here. This audience is familiar with them, and that's the focus of our discussion over these 2 days. But I do wish to point out something that I think is particularly important, especially when we discuss relationships with big tech companies, because it appears to me that these relationships are very closely related to economic, or rather audience power. What are the chances, for example, of a country like Lesotho with a population of 2.2 million, or Namibia with a population of 2.5 million? What are their chances of success at the negotiation table? Much more creativity is required to respond to the sustainability challenges in such contexts. If you'd allow me just a few minutes to very briefly touch on another area of importance, which I believe is increasingly important and linked to media viability and the democracy debate, which is the role of regional and global trade. Justine Limpert-Law recently wrote a paper where she discussed the Africa Free Trade Agreement and the fact that it prioritizes trade in communication services. And advocating that the focus should now be on how best to facilitate seamless, borderless trade and investment in these services, whether at the infrastructure or service level. Just for the record, for those of you who are not familiar with it, this Africa Free Trade Agreement brings together 1.3 billion people, representing the largest free trade area since the establishment of the World Trade Organization. A lot of power, I'd say. But Justine notes that the success of this process is simply not feasible without harmonizing national regulatory frameworks to ensure adherence to the fundamental principles of a successful communications infrastructure and services rollout. She makes several recommendations, but there's one particular recommendation that I'd like to highlight. She says that trade administration, including transactions involving communications or facilitated by them, must be reasonable, objective, and impartial. Trade administration must be reasonable, objective, and impartial. But what if they are not? Dr. Courtney Rush, also in the room, in her paper titled Weaponizing Privacy and Copyright Laws for Censorship, outlines how powerful governments and businesses are leveraging global technology policies to censor independent news media and discourage investigative journalism. She explains that copyright and privacy laws in the US and Europe shape the visibility and viability of news media worldwide, particularly in countries where political leaders ignore independent media. She coins the term moderation mercenaries and says that these laws are weaponized to erase critical journalistic coverage and drain digital advertising revenues. And she warns repeatedly that failing to address these issues undermines media freedom and the fight against disinformation and corruption. I would add that Africa, in this instance, is disproportionately affected, and historical inequalities in the information ecosystem are further entrenched. An example, and this is not necessarily related to what Courtney discussed, but I think it's relevant for our discussion. I think the renewed preoccupation of African governments with passing access to information, cybersecurity, and data privacy legislation should be considered more carefully. While this is good news for media freedom and freedom of expression activists, but I suspect that this is propelled by bilateral and regional trade agreements, not even by local business who's advocating for, a more conducive environment to do business, but big multinational companies backed by their governments and the need to adhere to their domestic trade regulations. I don't know, but this is a thought. Consider why a country like Angola passed its access to information law as far back as 2002. And by the way, that law is not operational, but the law does make it eligible to qualify for the Open Government Partnership. The challenges facing the media are many and increasingly complex. Viability is just one. I'd always advocate for a return to the basics in any endeavor to come up with solutions. Collectively, our ultimate goal is to develop knowledge societies. Perhaps one of our many strategies should be robust campaigns to highlight the value proposition presented by public interest media. So, unfortunately, I've not offered any solutions, but hopefully insights into the dynamics at play on the African continent. If anything, I believe this underscores the importance to secure not only the survival, but the flourishing of public interest journalism. Thank you.
Are there any questions for Zoe?
People want...
Okay, if you want tea, she's offering tea. Look, I think we are running a little bit behind, but I'm sure there'll be more chance for engagement. So we were supposed to come back at 3:15 for tea. I don't know if people can do a 10-minute turnaround. Just I'm trying to buy some time back. So if we could come back at 10 past tea, just grab and go.